Fire Emblem Three Houses is the latest and possibly most successful entry in the long-running strategy RPG series Fire Emblem. Though many advancements were made bringing the series back to the home console after so many installments on handheld devices, there do exist issues that may rub returning players or longtime fans the wrong way. Let's start this review by looking at the story for Fire Emblem Three Houses. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, we take on the role of Byleth, whom we get to choose either male or female avatars for, which more than anything will affect our romance options later into the game. Byleth is a young yet retired mercenary beginning a new job as an instructor. As an instructor, you'll get to choose between 3 different classes to teach. These classes are known as the Golden Deer, the Blue Lions, or the Black Eagles. Regardless of who you decide to teach, the events of the game for the first half will all roughly stay the same. Through each narrative path, we will learn the history of the land, and how the students all come from different walks of life that would otherwise imply political and philosophical divides between them. Yet here at the church, the school, the students put much of their history aside to view each other as equals and work together. Though not all remains well, as enemies from an ancient battle begin popping up and the flames of an old war begin to burn anew, tossing you and your students into the mix. In this world, certain characters are imbued with crests containing mysterious powers. Our character Byleth has a unique crest, perhaps previously unseen, and so the mystery of our crest and its power and its purpose must be uncovered as we protect our students and navigate a war that threatens to tear the student body as well as the land itself apart. Though things remain largely the same for the first half of the game in each playthrough, for the second half we see some more radical changes. Many of the events and battles fought along the way are repeated in different plot lines, however a great deal of context and character interaction gives new meaning to each one, making them feel newer and more fresh than they really are. This is the case for the 3 main routes, but there is a 4th hidden route, and that one deviates almost entirely, making what I would consider the most true-to-form, unique narrative branch in the whole game. It is also the only route that I would say really hits the level of difficulty Fire Emblem is known for, where every other route on standard difficulty just comes off as kind of easy. At least, minus the final boss of the Black Eagles. Golden Deer and Blue Lions routes I did personally find were easy enough that the concept of permadeath was inconsequential. If you're looking for difficulty, I'd recommend playing those routes on hard. Otherwise, the different plotlines while sharing many key events are really separated by the way the different casts characterize each event. Golden Deer's plotline, helmed by Husbando Claude, is very much the JRPG Friendship is Magic plotline, where students will put everything on the line to protect their friends and pull through for the greatest net gain for all. Blue Lions, led by the tragic Dimitri, is for those looking for psychological torment. This was by far my favorite plotline, though it did lack in the difficulty department. Here we see more of the horrors of war, how characters are changed by impossible situations, how they internalize suffering and project themselves and their deepest, darkest emotions back onto the world. Black Eagles, fronted by the misunderstood Edelgard, I feel is the true route, where you uncover more of the whole story than any other route. This route will challenge your belief in what's wrong or right in the world that's been presented to you. It focuses more on uncovering the true machinations of the world at large and exposing all the turning cogs for what they really are. Characters you thought you knew become what you hoped they weren't, but it all falls in line to make perfect sense. Saying any more than this would kind of be spoiling the real plot a bit, and I don't really aim to do that here. For the purpose of this review and to avoid spoilers as well, I will not be showing footage past the time skip. For what it's worth though, character designs, while I found to be personally a little on the boring side, do get way better post-time skip, when everybody has had time to mature and grow into themselves. A lot of your downtime in Fire Emblem Three Houses will be spent exploring the school ground where you and the students all live. Here you can talk to and get to know the various students, complete small tasks for them, and find whatever objects they may have lost. And you can do this for any student, whether they be part of your class or not. In doing this, you build relationships, which are also contingent on Byleth having gained the right stats. When relationships are solidified and a small set of prerequisites are met, you can recruit just about any student from any class to fight for you in the game's various battles. Students as well can spend time with each other, and when they grow close enough, unique social events will open up between them. This is where you get most of each character's backstory and where the characters are truly shaped out. There are other forms of interaction which are sadly mostly missed opportunities, such as tea time. In tea time, you invite a colleague out for some tea. You prompt them with some conversation topics and they react. Conversations don't really happen here. In fact, not much of anything does. This is mostly just here to feed into the game's other social events. Showing that you know your classmates by picking the right prompts will raise social levels and unlock social events more quickly. Characters really do make this game what it is, and without saying too much, there are a lot of them. Some of my personal favorites include Shamir, Bernadetta, Wreck-It Raphael.
We are not friends.
Marianne, Dimitri, Edelgard, and Petra. My least favorite characters include Lorenz. Though I kind of have to throw Byleth in here as a poor character too. Byleth is a blank slate. You're supposed to project yourself onto them, but a near complete lack of facial expressions makes so many scenes with them feel stilted and awkward, and the handling of Byleth as a character just dragged some moments down that should have been more impactful. I recall specifically in one social event, a character was confiding in Byleth about how their father's indifference towards them basically ruined their life, yet Byleth ironically sits there with a completely indifferent expression on their face. Yet the character in question acts like you're the best person for being there to listen. So I would say the cardboard expressions really don't help much with this game. And to top it off, Byleth is only half mute. When you level up, you'll actually hear their voice and a proper line of dialogue with proper characterization. So if you were self-projecting onto them, these infrequent voice-acted lines will kind of throw your characterization of Byleth a bit off course. But back to the school stuff. As a teacher, it's also your job to send students in for physical combat training or flight training and husbandry, among other things. You will also control what colleagues of yours will give lectures to the students, and depending on the weapon and class affinities of the students that are attending the lecture, different lectures will reap different results for different students. All of this training and lecturing stuff can be automated, but a real attentive player will see more rewards. It is here at the school as well where you will test your students to see if they can graduate from their current class to another. And by class this time, I don't mean math, science, and English. Rather, we're talking swordsman, thief, mage, that kind of stuff. Classes in this game are plentiful, and each one comes with its own unique design, which does a lot to create distinction between characters on the battlefield. Just clicking around through the classes to see the different designs shows you a whole world of different possibilities for your characters. But be mindful, if you haven't been teaching them the right lessons at school, the chances of them passing a test to become a new class will be low. The social aspects of this game do a lot to feed into your character's stats, which can radically alter their efficiency in combat. And this could in part be why the difficulty seems more on the easier side of things, as there's just so many ways to become more powerful. It's possible while developing the game they may have thought that the average player wouldn't be going all in on the social stuff, and the difficulty would therefore be more maintained. But if that's the case, they certainly misjudged their audience. It's my thought that they actually intentionally made this one easier, as it is the first return to console and they wanted it to be new player friendly. Now the school grounds is also your hub for merchant shops like weapons and items, and of course the JRPG's most important pastime, fishing. You can also harvest herbs, collect side quests, go out on bonus mission battles, which are arguably more difficult than the main game, and you can visit the Amiibo Gazebo if you fancy yourself a cheater. Not that it would matter too much though, considering the game's difficulty. The school itself, I kinda found a little poorly designed, where the locations of various things just felt a bit slapped together. There's not much of interest to look at, and most zones are empty save for the student body. Textures in the game overall are kind of weak, but where this is one area where you're expected to be up close and personal with on a regular basis, I kinda wish they put a little more work into its presentation. But it serves its purpose as a place where you can spend 20 to 30 hours in every playthrough. And with that said, how long is the game? Well, this is something everybody is going to answer differently. If you only do story missions and skip everything not related to them, 3 of the plot lines should take around 20 to 25 hours each, with the 4th taking maybe 20. So at a minimum, I would say 116 hours. That said, you'll likely want to look at a lot, and I think the average runtime for a single main story playthrough would take about 50 to 65 hours. However, once you've done one route, you'll find you have a lot of skippable content in the others, bringing the total runtime closer to 150 to 170 hours for all 4 of them. If you want to get really in-depth though, you can spend nearly that much time in a single playthrough. It's just not something I would do. I'd say the average completion time for all 4 routes is about 150 to 170 hours. But I will sit idly by here and wait for those who put 300 to 400 hours into the game to question that judgment by telling me how long they took in the comments. I know you guys just can't help yourselves. When you complete each storyline during the end credits, you get a sort of Suikoden style after the game epilogue. A brief description will tell you what each character went on to do with the rest of their lives, and which ones of them met and married and had children along the way. This is always a fun little watch to top off your playthrough, but I kinda miss some of the darker stuff in here. I get nobody wants to hear their favorite character getting disgraced, but I'd love these sections to highlight more of the horrors of war. Sure, they are all survivors, but even survivors of war are victims of war. Just a few characters who, never got acknowledged for their efforts and then died penniless the next year. Or somebody who married and had children but died of SARS while the second baby was being carried to term. Maybe so-and-so didn't recover from the bloodshed of war. Maybe they were haunted by the images of the men and women they killed and they had a psychotic breakdown and killed themselves 5 years later. Stuff like that I think would do a lot to take away the glorification from war and give something more meaningful to chew on after the game has come to a close. But that's just my opinion. Last thing I want to mention here is that there are a lot of missables. Most of them are logically explained by plot developments, so I can't and won't complain about it. But stay warned. If you aim to 100% this game, you will be at it for a long time, and you will have to play very, very diligently. Now, that about covers the introduction to the story, the characters, and the social aspects of the game from the central hub, the school. And I know it took a long time, so how many of you are still out there watching? I can already tell this video is going to be a very long one just here in the recording process. But thankfully, that was the longest part of the review. From here, let's take a look at the combat. If you've played any strategy RPGs before, this one isn't going to come with too many surprises. But the first thing you need to consider happens before the game starts. How will you be playing? There's 2 different difficulties to choose from, standard and difficult. Standard is easier than necessary, and difficult is closer to the series normal. After this, you need to pick whether or not you'll play with permadeath on or off. On standard difficulty, this decision hardly matters. On difficult, it matters a little bit more, but still not that much, thanks to the Divine Pulse mechanic, which we'll touch on in a little bit. I left the game on standard as I find hard to just be a little tedious, a little more time consuming rather than a little more difficult. You guys can play however you want, I'm not going to judge you. Once all this is set, battle is rather straightforward. Prior to battle, you pick your squad. Most battles are fought with around 10 units, although 3 of them can have support characters attached to them, which is a great way to put under-leveled units into battle to keep them safe and get them leveled up. Before battle starts, you'll also want to make sure everybody has all their item slots filled with keys, weapons, and curatives. You also want to make sure that the weapons you're bringing into battle aren't all about to break. When combat begins, it plays out in 2, sometimes 3 phases. The player phase, where you get to move all of your units, the enemy phase, where of course the enemy gets to move, and if there are any ally units on the field, you will also have the ally phase, where the allies move on their own. During your turn, you can only perform so many actions before a character must end their turn. This typically means moving and then attacking, or moving and then using an item or a spell. The distance that you can move is determined by the character that you're using, as well as the ground you're standing on. Horses and humans walking on wet sand won't move very far very fast. However, flying units will of course not be affected by it at all. But flying units do have their own set of drawbacks, where they will need to dismount if they want to use any of the terrain to their advantage. Certain tiles, for example, can heal players, but only if the player is actually standing on them. Other tiles contain bushes, which grounded units can use to take cover in, and this will drastically lower the enemy's ability to land an attack on you successfully. Obviously, if you are flying, you're still in pretty plain sight. Terrain plays a huge part of battle, and the benefit of tiles like bushes can easily sway the course of a battle. In fact, I'd even say that the bushes themselves are a little bit exploitable, and that their effect should probably have been nerfed just a little bit to restore some more of the difficulty of the game, but I digress. When you make it to an enemy for an attack, there's a few numbers you really gotta look out for, as most battles boil down to gambling on RNG and playing the odds. The most important ones here are MT, which shows how much damage you'll do if you hit, the hit number, which shows your chances of hitting an enemy in terms of a percentage, and the crit, which shows your chances to get a critical attack on an enemy. If these all check out, then you'll want to take a look at the same number coming back from the enemy. You don't want to attack an enemy if they're just going to kill you in the counterattack. If the numbers don't check out, then consider using a different weapon, or trying a combat art, a special skill tied to the weapon and character. If that still doesn't work, try repositioning your character or reconsidering the attack altogether. Another thing you need to consider is your weapon types. Although the rock, paper, scissors style weapon triangle from previous Fire Emblem games isn't highlighted here, it does still exist. It's just pushed very far into the background. Some weapons and combat arts target enemies far more effectively than others, so just bear that in mind. You'll notice weapons also have durability. Every attack drains your durability, and combat arts drain it even more. Weapons can be repaired, but it's mostly the special weapons you'll want to focus your repairs on, as these are the ones you don't want to lose. Before going into battle, you can also set some battalions to your units, so that they can use special attacks known as Gambits. Some enemies have special barriers preventing your attacks from being fully effective, and the quickest way to get rid of these barriers is to attack with a Gambit. The more players you have surrounding you when you use a Gambit, the more players will take part in the Gambit attack, and the more effective it will be. Most enemies and even bosses, I would say, can be taken out with a single well-placed attack. But certain enemies will have multiple life bars, and a single attack will not carry over to the second life bar. This does help with the game's difficulty a little bit, where it guarantees some enemies won't be killed in a single attack, yet it's still not hard to kill them in a single player phase. Though rarely seen, status effects like poison and burning do exist in this game as well. Experience points are handed out at the end of every player's attack, meaning you level up gradually as the battles go along. This, I feel, also helps keep battle a little more lively. Social links also increase as players fight side by side and perform link attacks. One of the only other big things to look at here is the previously mentioned Divine Pulse. This is a mechanic you may want to ignore entirely if you're looking for a challenge. Divine Pulse is a special ability that you can use a set amount of times per battle to rewind time to whatever turn you want, allowing you to undo any bad or damning decision you may have made along the way. The game didn't need this mechanic to be easy, but this definitely made sure that it was newcomer friendly. By an opposite token, however, on harder difficulties, this would massively mitigate the frustration one would endure by getting unlucky RNG, resulting in an enemy with an only 1% chance to hit and crit you, actually pulling off the attack, killing your character, and causing you to restart the entire fight. So I'm not really going to complain about Divine Pulse. That aside, though textures here, like the rest of the game, are kind of ugly, I really like how they handle the graphic transition, where you'll typically be playing overhead while selecting your moves, then you move into a full 3D rendered representation of the environment to watch your attacks play out. You can play battles fully in this 3D environment as well, and avoid the overhead camera angle altogether, but I personally found it a little harder to navigate a good strategy this way. But yeah, that is essentially Fire Emblem Three Houses combat. It's not crazy, but it all works together to make combat fun and engaging despite its lack of difficulty. Now let's look at a few of the technicals. First, the graphics. We've touched on this a few times, but let's look a little bit closer now. Fire Emblem Three Houses is unfortunately kind of ugly. There's no getting around it. At the very least, the environments are. Most of them have poor and murky textures with little to no real stylization. There's not a whole lot in terms of special effects on display, and the resolution is pretty rough. It definitely looks like this was still designed with handhelds in mind. The character models are significantly better, but a complete lack of anti-aliasing makes them appear very rough around the edges. I'd like to say this was all kept light to make the game run better, but there are still FPS drops in battle when playing attack animations. This doesn't affect anything as you have no control during these segments anyway, but it leads me to believe that either the team in charge didn't quite know how to implement everything needed to make the game look and run cleanly, or they just really wanted to save your battery life. The music in the game is fantastic. At first I wasn't exactly enamored with it, feeling it was kind of standard background filler, but over time the hooks sank their claws into me more and more, and now every track I hear just takes me back to where they're used in the game. They are absolutely the sound of Fire Emblem Three Houses, as characteristic as the game itself. The sound effects aren't anything crazy, they're just standard, good, but not great. The game is voiced in 2 languages, Japanese and English. I looked at both and found myself switching between both here and there, and both are absolutely solid. I did feel that some people were better characterized in Japanese, and the differences between the characterizations on some were night and day, but neither track felt completely better than the other to me. They were both just pretty great.
Someone must put a stop to this cycle of the strong trampling the weak.
Yet we have the strength to scale the walls between us, to reach out our hands in friendship so we can open our true hearts to one another. That's how we win!
どこかで誰かが立たねばならない。強者が弱者を踏みにじる負の連鎖。俺たちは弱き者だ。だからこそ壁を乗り越え、手を取って心で触れ合う。生きるために。
I seen no issues with the translation really, and I thought the menu presentations were all pretty good as well. So from here, let's just jump into my verdict. A struggle to find a decent balance in combat made pursuing unique character builds feel discouraged or unnecessary, but combat mechanically still offered enough to be engaging. The graphics overall, I feel, are subpar, as is the art direction and the game's stylization. Everything you need to see and know is easy enough to identify, but it does kind of hurt to look at. Considering this, the game's imperfect performance feels a little more suspect. The OST is a real highlight despite taking some time to sink in. But the biggest highlight by far is the game's characters, who are all really varied and fleshed out if you're willing to take the time to explore their social events. With 4 separate storylines to play through and easily over 150 hours of content to sink into, it's a great bang for your buck. But I would highly recommend not playing all 4 storylines back to back, as the amount of repeated content between them can create a sense of monotony that might burn you out, and make you not want to pursue the rest of the plot lines, even though by the end I would say each storyline is worth looking at. There are some missed opportunities in some of the social events, but given how many different forms of social events there are, you're going to get your fill either way. At the end of the day, Fire Emblem Three Houses is a great game with a few missed opportunities. I hesitate to call it an amazing game, but stopping to consider just how much content is here, how many characters there are that I will remember for a long time to come, and just how many cool moments I've seen in some of these storylines, I certainly think that this is far better than just being a good game, even with its shortcomings. Fire Emblem Three Houses at its launch price is worth the play, but it's also worth pacing yourself on, and approaching with leveled expectations. And that's all I'm gonna say on Fire Emblem Three Houses, and yes, I changed my shirt since the last time you see me. This is a long video, I had to film it over the course of 2 different days. With that said, you guys know the deal. If you liked the video or found it useful at all, like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you can. Links to all my socials and Patreon are in the description below, and as always folks, thanks for watching.